Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome to The World Over Live. What a show we have for you tonight. The controversy over the Obama administration's HHS mandate continues. Here to discuss his bold response to the contraceptive mandate and the challenges to religious liberty is the Archbishop of the Military Services, Timothy Broglio. And later, film critic for the National Catholic Register, Greydanus is here. We'll talk about some of the films nominated for an Academy Award. What do the current crop of films say about our culture, and what were your favorites? If you'd like to join the program, give us a call. Send your emails and calls now. The number is 1-800-221-9460 in the U.S. and internationally 205-271-2980. Or drop us an email, worldover@ewtn.com. Let's get things started. Here's the brief news from the world over this week. Religious opposition to President Obama's contraception mandate has spread far beyond Catholicism. More than 2,500 evangelical leaders have signed a letter condemning the Obama administration's contraceptive mandate, calling it, quote, a severe blow to our religious liberty. Richard Land, head of the Southern Baptist Convention's Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, pledged to challenge the mandate both in court and in Congress. Also this week, the National Clergy Council, representing Protestant, Catholic, Evangelical, and Orthodox clergy, delivered a statement to the White House declaring a state of emergency. The organization calls on all people of conscience to, quote, take extraordinary actions to resist the president's decrees. At the same time, according to The Atlantic magazine, a number of Protestant colleges and universities are threatening to drop health care coverage for their students if the HHS mandate is not reversed. And Ave Maria University is the latest Catholic institution to file suit against the federal government over the mandate. The Naples, Florida University currently pays about $1.7 million a year in health insurance for its more than 100 employees. Contraception costs are not covered. Of the lawsuit, Ave Maria President Jim Toohey said it's a sad day when an American citizen or organization has no choice but to sue its own government in order to exercise religious liberty rights guaranteed by our nation's Constitution. And the U.S. Bishops' Conference, in their strongest statement yet, is urging fellow bishops to continue rallying against the Obama administration's mandate and encouraged support for legislation that will contravene the mandate. In a letter this week, Cardinal Timothy Dolan and Bishop William Lori, the president of the USCCB and chairman of the Committee on Religious Liberty, respectively, noted the compromise offered by the president failed to address the key moral problems in the mandate. The bishops accused the administration of attempting to reduce the free exercise of religion to a privilege arbitrarily granted by the government. They further asserted that in the U.S., religious liberty does not depend on the benevolence of who is regulating us. It is rather, quote, our first freedom. More on this in our next segment. And there was a religious liberty victory in Washington state this week. A federal judge ruled that the state of Washington cannot force pharmacies to sell Plan B or other emergency contraceptives. In a case dating back to 2007, U.S. District Judge Ronald Leighton sided with two pharmacists and a drugstore owner who argued that the state's true goal was not to promote drug access for people who needed them, but as it had claimed, but to suppress the pharmacist's religious conscience. The judge wrote, the most compelling evidence that the rules target religious conduct is the fact that the rules contain an almost unlimited variety of exemptions for secular reasons, but fail to provide exemptions for reasons of conscience. Further appeals are expected. And as the British government continues its deliberation on legalizing same-sex marriage, a new campaign to defend marriage was launched this week. In London on Monday, the Coalition for Marriage announced its campaign and petition drive to defend the current legal definition of marriage. The group has the backing of the former head of the Anglican Church, Archbishop of Canterbury, Lord Carey. At the press event announcing the campaign, Lord Carey called the introduction of same-sex marriage a hostile strike and an act of cultural and theological vandalism against the institution. And a few updates on the same-sex marriage front on this side of the Atlantic. Proponents of Proposition 8, the California initiative protecting marriage, have decided to appeal their case to the full panel of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. In a split decision earlier this month, a three-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit ruled that the 2008 voter-backed initiative violated the U.S. Constitution's promise of equal protection. Prop 8 attorneys had previously indicated they would consider skipping the full circuit court, notoriously known as the most liberal appellate court in the land, and take their appeal directly to the U.S. Supreme Court. Andy Pugno, who's the general counsel for the Protect Marriage Coalition, said the filing gives the Ninth Circuit a chance to correct this anomalous decision by just two judges, overturning the vote of 7 million Californians. One way or other, legal experts expect the case will end up before the Supreme Court. Meanwhile, as promised, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie vetoed same-sex marriage legislation that passed in his state this last week. Christie once again called on the Democratic-led legislature to put the issue up to a vote by the people. They have, however, balked at a ballot initiative, as many political observers believe that such a measure would fail. New Jersey's Catholic bishops lauded Governor Christie's veto. And as the Assad regime continues its violent and deadly crackdown in Syria, one of the church's top leaders in the Holy Land is making an urgent appeal for Christians devastated by the civil unrest. Father Pier Battista Pizzaballa, the Franciscan Custos of the Holy Land, said that Syria's internal clashes have created a time of total confusion and dismay. He said the unrest, combined with the embargo, have all but cut off international business and architecture and agriculture. Chaldean Catholic Archbishop of Aleppo voiced fears that the spreading violence could endanger the Christian presence in Syria and that the Christians are already leaving the country to escape. To assist, go to the Franciscan website at www.proterrasancta.org. And finally, this past weekend, Pope Benedict announced 7 new saints who will be canonized in October, including 2 from the United States. Among them are Blessed Kateri Tekakwitha, a 17th century Native American Indian who converted to Catholicism. She's the first Native American woman to be venerated by the Church. And the other new saint is Blessed Marianne Cope of the Sisters of St. Francis in Syracuse. Blessed Marianne spent many years caring for the lepers in Hawaii with St. Damien of Molokai. And finally, I want to remind you about our new contest in honor of Mother Angelica's 89th birthday in April. I want to hear from you. Let me know how Mother Angelica has touched or changed your life. Was it something she said or something you saw? Send your stories to Raymond@RaymondArroyo.com. Put Mother in the subject line. The author of the best stories will receive a free copy of one of my books on Mother Angelica, and we may read the letter on air. So be sure to send those Mother Angelica remembrances to Raymond@RaymondArroyo.com. When we return, we'll talk about the threats to religious liberty and how it's affecting the way the Church ministers to U.S. military personnel. Archbishop Timothy Broglio, head of the Archdiocese of the Military Services, is coming up, and what nun is nominated for an Academy Award? We'll tell you when The World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. When the recent HHS mandate became public, few bishops responded as bluntly or directly as my first guest. To talk about his response and the serious religious liberty challenges facing those in the armed forces and the chaplains who serve them is the leader of the Archdiocese of the Military Services, Archbishop Timothy Broglio. Thanks for being here,
It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you. I want to start with your letter. I want to read a little excerpt so our audience is on the same page with us. You wrote, and I'm editing down here, This mandate is a blow to a freedom that you have fought to defend and for which you have seen your buddies fall in battle. The administration has cast aside the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, denying to Catholics our nation's first and most fundamental freedom, that of religious liberty. We cannot, we will not comply with this unjust law. Tough words.
Indeed, and I think the situation merited that kind of response and that direct response.
Now, when you issued this letter, you wanted this read in the pulpit the following Sunday. I think you sent the email out to your chaplains on a Thursday.
Yes.
And on Saturday, you heard from the U.S. Army Chief of Chaplains who took issue with reading the letter. What was the problem?
The problem, according to Chaplain Rutherford, was that he felt it would endanger the priests, that they could be in a situation where they might be seen as being critical of the government. In my response to him, I said that that this had already been defined once by the courts in a very famous case of Perry versus Rigdon, in which the Air Force was told that what a chaplain says in the context of his religious service, even if it's about a political matter, is acceptable.
And falls under the First Amendment.
And falls under the First Amendment, exactly.
The protecting religious freedom. So how did you all figure this out? You ended up calling him.
Well, what happened, he actually called me when he received the letter.
Okay.
And wanted me to rescind it, which I, of course, refused to do. And then his chief of staff sent an email message to the senior chaplain, not necessarily the Catholic priest, but the senior chaplain, directing the senior chaplain that, because of course the chief of chaplains has rank but no command, so he cannot give an order. So he recommended that the letter not be read, that it be made available at the back of the church for those who would want it, and that the priest celebrant make a comment about it in the announcements.
But not reading the letter itself.
Not reading the letter itself.
But eventually they did read the letter.
Oh, indeed.
After your pushing back.
Well, the initial pushback was some of the more senior chaplains contacted me privately. That's how I knew about the message that had been sent out. And they asked me what they should do. And I said, well, do what I told you to do. So many of them read the letter. Of course, in those situations, they don't have that much to fear because they're already senior in rank.
Right.
Most of them have already been in the Army for many, many years. The problem is really for a younger chaplain who might be confronted by a senior chaplain of another faith who is telling him not to read this letter. However, in the process of looking for a resolution, I called the Secretary of the Army, and we agreed that we would wait until Monday to come to some sort of a decision. And then he called me back and suggested that, at least in the Army version of the letter, I remove one small phrase.
The line we read at the end, that we will not, well, we will not comply with this unjust law. Why was that a problem?
He felt that he said, I understand what you're saying and you know what you're saying, but he felt that it might be interpreted by some as an incitement to violence or to civil disobedience. Well, to a certain extent, it is an incitement to civil disobedience because that's really what we're forced to do.
Archbishop, why are you so concerned personally about this HHS mandate? I mean, if you listen to the administration, if you listen to so many people in this town, they keep saying, look, this is about giving contraception to women. Why are you trying to control these women and what they do with their bodies, Archbishop?
Well, actually, I'm not trying to control them at all. What I am saying is that the federal government cannot tell a religious organization or really any person to act against his conscience. That is protected by the First Amendment. The First Amendment guarantees us freedom of religion, not merely freedom of worship, but freedom of religion.
And more we keep hearing that phrase.
Yes.
You're free, you have a freedom to worship. Well, worship, all that means is I can, in my private space, I can worship God. It pushes God entirely, though, out of the public sphere, yes?
Exactly, exactly. It's almost the warning that Pope John Paul II gave in the presidential palace in Paraguay when he said, you cannot corral God in the sacristy. You cannot corral the church in the sacristy. You have to allow people to respond to their consciences.
Is it the precedent that concerns you most of all, allowing the government to have this much control over such intimate concerns as healthcare, how the medications we take, the treatment that we seek, the screenings that we seek, to have the government encroaching in that area of life? Do you fear it may broaden into other areas?
Well, I think it could very well, because once you allow the government a certain amount of space to tell you what you can do and what you can't do, beyond that which is necessary for good order, you've opened the door to a Pandora's box.
I want to remind you, you're part of the program. You can call us 1-800-221-9460 in the U.S. or internationally 205-271-2980. And I know some of you men and women on bases around the world are watching, so drop us an email, worldover@ewtn.com. He's your Archbishop. I want you to be able to talk to him. So we're talking to Archbishop Timothy Broglio. Archbishop, your men are in a particular, and women are in a particular situation here where they are working with the government so closely vis-a-vis the military. And yet, they're in a position where so many of their teachings and personal beliefs are coming into conflict now with government policy. What are you advising them? How are you dealing with this now?
Well, obviously, we always advise them that they have to obey what are just orders, but no one can order you to act against your conscience. And that's so fundamental in the military that even if you're a conscientious objector, you can be dispensed from your commitment. And generally, the person you would go to for that kind of a dispensation is the chaplain, because the chaplain is the one person on a military installation who you can see, and he does not have to report to the commanding officer that he has seen you. There's no one else on an installation that has that freedom.
I want to talk about the don't ask, don't tell policy, which was lifted by the administration, by Congress, last year. And when that was lifted, it really put so many chaplains, especially Catholic chaplains, in an awkward situation, because suddenly you had the government saying homosexual activity is accepted. We're going to embrace it and accept homosexuals as, just like anybody else. Okay, fine. Now in your chapels, in the services that are conducted by your chaplains, the Catholic Church has always taught that homosexuality is a sin. Here again, are we seeing a situation where the teaching and the beliefs are running up against government policy? And might it put you, and is it putting your chaplains in a situation where they could be acting illegally by acting on their faith?
I certainly hope not. One of my concerns, however, is that obviously what a chaplain says, what a priest says in the context of a liturgical service, he is protected, at least heretofore he was protected by the Constitution. The issue is what happens in a situation where he is not in a strictly religious setting. For instance, someone comes to him for counseling and says, I have a problem with my relationship. Should the priest respond and say, well, there's a fundamental problem with the kind of relationship you have, he could easily be subject to
some sort of discriminatory action there.
Exactly.
Or charged with such. We should also talk about, I've been getting emails throughout the day, as I announced on Facebook that you'd be on the program. And there have been a number of emails from military personnel saying they have been subject in recent days to sensitivity training about just this issue. Are your chaplains being subjected to sensitivity training about homosexuality and how to deal? I mean, homosexuals are people too. I don't know why there needs to be a special sensitivity training, but
exactly. As part of this whole lifting of the so-called don't ask, don't tell provision, all military personnel have been subject to training, and it's been done on different levels, starting at the top and working its way down. And so, yes, the chaplains have had to submit to this training.
And what is the training like?
It's fundamentally response to given situations and how you would react in those situations, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Obviously, many things are already covered by the military code of justice, but now that's applied to these specific situations.
I want to go to the phones. Peg from Indiana. You're on the World Over Live. What's your question, Peg?
Can you hear me?
Peg, you there?
Hello?
I don't hear Peg. Okay, we'll come back to Peg when we can hear. I don't hear. Do you hear?
No, I do not.
Sorry, Peg. We'll come back to you in a little bit. Now, the Defense Department authorized same-sex marriages in chapels and authorized chaplains to carry out those marriages in states where they're legal. There again, isn't the church in a very awkward spot? And what is your position?
Well,
obviously you can't.
Obviously, our position is that no Catholic priest will perform or bless any sort of union of that nature. There's a more fundamental difficulty, though, to this provision because there is a federal law called the Defense of Marriage Act, which defines marriage as between a man and a woman. So it's difficult to understand how, on a federal installation, something which is against federal law is in some way permitted, blessed. It's very much like they don't take the military does not take the same position, for instance, in a state where marijuana is admitted for medical purposes. Try to bring that on an installation and see what happens. They won't look the other way.
Interesting. Interesting. Are we reaching a point when you take all of these instances as one? Are the chaplains moving into the same space that Catholic hospitals, Catholic orphanages, Catholic social service outreach has been dealing with over the last decade? And frankly, we have to say, they've lost. A lot of Catholic orphanages are out of business now, a lot of Catholic hospitals, because they were unwilling to put their beliefs aside, their teachings and conscience aside, and continue the good work that they've been doing for decades. Is that where the chaplaincy is?
I certainly hope not. I certainly hope not. And I think that we will be able to successfully defend the chaplains, certainly in a court of law. I think the example that you cited from Washington State at the beginning of the program is a very, very good example where the judiciary will protect.
Yeah, that's an interesting case, and
very
maybe a harbinger of things to come. I mean, we also had the Supreme Court precedent earlier this year, where you had that that cleargy, whatever they call it, ministerial exception that they were looking for there, and it seems there's space there, even among the justices, despite all their differences. There's unanimity there. Let's go to Peg again. Peg from Indiana. What's your question, Peg?
My question is, does this mandate also violate the separation between church and state? And can that be
Archbishop, you want to deal with that?
It does in the sense that the state is in the process of telling us that we have to fund something that we consider immoral. And so in that sense, it does violate the separation between church and state.
Yeah, it fundamentally does it. You know, people often, when they hear the separation of church and state, they think it's to keep the church out of the state. No, it's the other way around.
It's the other way around.
Keep the state out of the church. And no, it absolutely does. I want to ask you about a story we're seeing in the headlines today. There was a burning of a couple of Korans in Afghanistan. Now, this was an accident, we have to say right up front. They were accidentally placed in one area and they were incinerated. But inside of them, they had very hostile, horrible, anti-Semitic scrawlings and things inside of them. Nonetheless, they were accidentally burned. We have since had the President, the Secretary of State, the head of the CIA, the NATO commander apologizing to not only the folks in Afghanistan, but also Muslims worldwide. Is there a sensitivity here for religious sensibilities that perhaps don't extend to the situations we've been talking about?
It would certainly seem that that is the case. It's almost as if it's because Christianity in this country is majority, then we don't have to we don't have to worry about offending their sensibilities, and yet, by the same token, one wonders if the same sensibilities existed with other faith groups which are minorities,
sure.
if there would not be more sensitivity to those groups.
No, it's really, when I saw that story, I thought, wow, we're bending, there's a repeated apologies. Archbishop, now Cardinal Dolan, can't even get a little exemption from one regulation, and we don't know what's coming down the pike. There are dozens of other regulations that have yet to be written. So we don't know how deeply these regulations will go in profoundly changing not only the way people deal with their health care every day, but our conscience and those of our family members. So let's talk for a moment about your ad limina visit. You were just in Rome with the Pope. A rather prophetic ad limina visit, would you say?
Yes, it certainly was. I went with the metropolitan sees of Baltimore and Washington. Of course, that's the same region of the Episcopal Conference that the Archdiocese for Military Services falls. We had three of my auxiliaries and I had a very good discussion with the Holy Father in what's called the private audience. That was Monday of the first week, in which he asked a fundamental question about how we care for such a widespread audience, such a widespread congregation, and how we attend to their needs. And he was also very, very interested in the depth of that religious coverage and accommodation. Then, of course, the second moment, which is certainly the more important moment, was the general or the public audience with the Holy Father, public in the sense that all of us were there together, during which, after a brief introduction by Cardinal Wuerl, the Holy Father delivered a discourse on the importance of religious liberty and freedom of conscience. And as you say, it was almost prophetic in the fact that, in one sense, it's very moving to listen to the Holy Father cite the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence to us.
Yeah.
And then secondly, in light of what transpired shortly after, almost days after this discourse.
The very next day, yeah.
Exactly. It was just, it was incredible that, that he would touch on some of these same issues that we would then use in our own treatment of this question.
We're getting so many emails here. One saying, please let the Archbishop know he doesn't stand alone. Many Catholics, both military and non-military, have gained courage to speak out against these unjust laws. I've never known a government to censor a bishop since Thomas à Becket. Well, there might be a few more in between.
I think so.
And there may be a few more to come. But anyway, you've got lots of people encouraging you and thanking you. The Archbishop strikes a blow for liberty, Jim writes. So there's lots of that sort of thing. There are a few here that are asking the question, why didn't the bishops screen the bill or look closely at the bill before accepting the idea of a universal health care as embodied in this particular bill?
Oh, we did. That is one of the reasons why, as a conference, we found ourselves in a very difficult situation, because we have, since the 1920s, advocated some sort of universal health care. However, when the bill was introduced, we immediately announced our opposition to it because of some of the portions of the bill, some of the aspects of the bill, which did go against our fundamental moral teaching. And we asked from the beginning that these be adjusted. When they weren't adjusted, then we took the path of asking for an exemption. And basically, we were led to believe, at least the members of the International and the Domestic Committee on Justice and Peace, were led to believe that there wasn't going to be much space for an exemption. This would have been at the toward the middle of December.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the announcement was made just before the March for Life.
Yeah, just amazing. I wanted to turn for a moment in our final moments to talk about the toll of this long war on your chaplains and on the men and women who are coming home. You have a unique vantage point. I know you spent some time with the troops, Christmas, and you spend some of the holidays with them in the installations. Tell me what you're seeing.
You see people who are certainly people who are filled with a love of their country, people who are very professional in what they do, but men and women who are tired. Yesterday I spent, as I have every year since I've been the Archbishop for Military Services, I spent at, well, this year at Walter Reed, which is now in Bethesda.
Right.
And you know, you're struck as I went around and visited some of these soldiers and Marines, you're first struck by the fact that they're so young. And then secondly, most of the ones I visited were without their legs. And yet they were filled with a positive spirit. They were filled with faith. They were even facing the prospect of a long rehabilitation with hope. And I think that as a nation, we have to encourage these young men and women, and especially their families. That is the price that we will pay for this longest war in our history. The damage that has been done to families.
Well, it's a great reminder of the cost of liberty and the cost of these rights that we so often take for granted, and that I know you're fighting so valiantly for these days. Archbishop Broglio, thanks so much for being with us.
Very welcome.
Thank you, and we hope you'll come back.
Thank you.
Thank you. I should say, and we've gotten some emails, and it's a good clarification. I misspoke, and I should have said homosexual acts are considered a sin in the Catholic Church, not homosexual people. So I wanted to make that clarification. For more on the work of the Archdiocese for the Military Services headed by Archbishop Broglio, visit milarch, milarch.org. Up next, it is Oscar season. What do the best film nominees tell us about ourselves? And which nun is nominated for an Oscar this year? National Catholic Register film critic Stephen Greydanus joins us when The World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. Tens of millions of people will watch the annual Academy Awards this weekend. But what do the nominated films tell us about where we are as a people? What should have been nominated? And why didn't that Justin Bieber movie and Medea's Big Happy Family make the cut? We will take your calls and emails throughout the segment. You can always reach us at worldover@ewtn.com, and the numbers are on your screen. To help us discuss all of this and make some sense is film critic for the National Catholic Register, Stephen Greydanus. Stephen, great to see you. Glad to have you on the show.
Good to be here.
Delighted to see you. Let's talk about the films that are nominated, and I know a lot of you may not even have seen these films, but I want to talk about them because I do think it's a cultural touchstone. There are family films for the first time in almost 60 years, as you recently pointed out in a column. You've got Hugo, which is I guess Martin Scorsese's attempt at a family film. War Horse, Steven Spielberg's beautiful film. The Artist, which is a silent movie. What are you seeing here?
Well, first of all, just to see a movie like Hugo, which is a family film, it's an unconventional family film, at the top of the Oscar, leading the pack. It received 11 nominations, more than any other film. It's not favored to win now. The award is probably going to go to The Artist. Yeah. But just to see a family film leading the pack is really encouraging. Not since the 1960s has a family film received so many nominations compared to other films in that year. The last film was Oliver. Which came out the year that I was born. Oh, boy. So it's been a while, and since then, no family film has actually won Best Picture. Now, Beauty and the Beast was nominated in 1991, but it lost to Silence of the Lambs. So it's interesting to see films like this that you can watch with your children being honored, being highlighted. Yeah. In many cases, they are films that people haven't seen. In fact, of all 9 Best Picture nominees, only The Help even cracked the top 40 at the box office of 2001.
Really?
So by and large, these are films that people have not seen.
Yeah, these are art house films. I mean, many of them, I thought I was the only one, maybe you and I were the only ones who saw these movies. Some of them are a bit, arty, like
Yes.
the Tree of Life. Now, I happen to love Terry Malick's films. Terry Malick is a writer, director, The Thin Red Line, The Lost World, and now this beautiful Tree of Life. Tell us about the Tree of Life and why it was so special.
It is a beautiful film. It's a very divisive film. It speaks very powerfully to some people and not at all to others. Very personal film. What I
It's an odd film. The storytelling is out of sync.
Well, what I love about it is that it really raises the big questions about God, the mystery of suffering, guilt, redemption, grace, nature, more powerfully and insistently than any other film this year. If you compare it to another art film with which it co-debuted at Cannes this year and was kind of opposed to, Lars von Trier's Melancholia, which is also a difficult, divisive art film that also deals with kind of end-of-the-world themes, but in a very nihilistic way. You know, the Academy has sometimes gone nihilistic in the past, movies like No Country for Old Men and There Will Be Blood, and to see them embracing the more life-affirming films like War Horse and The Tree of Life is an encouraging thing.
What does it tell us? Because these are the same pool of peoples. We should tell same pool of people. We should tell everybody this isn't the People's Choice Awards. These are basically Hollywood insiders and professionals who vote on this thing. Actors and directors and scenic designers and screenwriters. I mean, it is people who are immersed in the industry.
Right.
What does it tell us about the industry itself?
Well, it tells us, first of all, when you see two films being nominated and honored that are both about cinema and about silent cinema, these are a bunch of people who believe in the importance of the movies.
Yeah, so this could just be a vanity trip. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying there's a lot of that. There's absolutely a lot of that.
Let's talk about those two movies because, and they are challenging and interesting. I will be honest, I love Martin Scorsese's films. I always have. Being Italian, there's something Italian that connects there, even when they're violent and horribly profane. But Hugo is different in that it's his first family film. My children, I have to say, and I want to hear, did you take your kids to see it?
I went with my 13-year-old son.
And did he stay awake?
He stayed awake. He was impressed, but he didn't really like it.
Yeah, my kids felt the same way. They were bored to tears.
But I have heard from children who responded very positively to it.
Really?
So I think that's really kind of a theme that we're seeing with all of these films, all of the Best Picture nominees. They all have that divisive quality. We don't have a single film like Pixar's Up in 2010 or, that just spoke universally to everyone.
Yeah, beautiful film, a beautiful film. But Pixar, you wrote a column recently where you talked about that animated series of films which are nominated each year. Pixar didn't make the cut. Cars 2 wasn't so hot.
And this is the first time in the 10 years that that award has existed, Best Animated Feature. Every year that Pixar's had a feature, now they haven't always won, but they have always been nominated since 2002 until now. And really, Cars 2 was not a particularly deserving film. I was disappointed that Pixar, which has really done so much to raise the bar for family entertainment generally, you know, it's not only their own work, you can feel the pressure that they're putting on other studios like DreamWorks and so forth to kind of raise their own game to compete with Pixar.
Well, John Lasseter, nobody knows how to tell a story like him, and they take a long time to shape and mold these stories before they even get to the animated stage. I mean,
absolutely, and I think they didn't do that with Cars 2.
No, Cars looked like a rush job for a theme park edition, but we'll talk about that another time. Tell me about War Horse. I saw War Horse, and we went to the junket for that, and I was moved by it. I thought it was a beautiful film.
It is a moving film. Steven Spielberg really had a kind of difficult job to do in that he was adapting a novel which is told from the point of view of a horse, like other horse movies before it, and he wanted to tell it in a realistic mode without voiceover or anything. So he had a hard time, I think, finding the emotional center of the story, but it's a beautiful film. It's like a lot of the movies this year, it's a nostalgic period piece that really celebrates human goodness and the capacity for decency in many different settings. I love the scene where the British soldier comes to take the boy's horse. And you would expect an upper-class British soldier to be kind of imperious and privileged and just kind of, you know, steal this boy's beloved horse and do it with a sneer on his face. But he turns out to be a very honest and decent guy who's like, look, I don't have enough money, I'll bring him back if I can. And he goes to extraordinary lengths to try to convince the boy that his horse is going to be well cared for.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful film. And I think particularly for boys. I mean, people ask me,
absolutely,
what was War Horse like? I said, well, it's kind of, do you know Lassie? And they say, yes. I say, it's Lassie with a horse. I mean, you know, it's a Lassie trying to get home.
And trench warfare.
That's right, with a little World War I thrown in just for kicks. who are seeing these films? Why aren't people going out to see these movies? And what does it tell us that Hollywood is nominating films that have no audience to speak of?
That, I think, is the downside of all of this. I mean, when you look at the movies that we went to go see last year, the movies that Americans really turned out in droves for, we're talking about the last Harry Potter movie, the third Transformers movie, the fourth Twilight movie, The Hangover, a fourth Pirates of the Caribbean movie.
All the sequel and sequels of sequels.
Really disposable blockbuster entertainment. And then when Hollywood wants to do something significant, it's forced to turn to these films that really people aren't watching. And I think that is a problem. It was a problem that really came to a head in 2009 when the Academy bypassed movies like WALL-E and The Dark Knight and honored a bunch of films that nobody had seen. Slumdog Millionaire, Milk, Frost Nixon, Benjamin Button. And in 2010, they expanded the pool, and it worked in 2010 because there was Pixar's Up, and there was The Blind Side, and there was Avatar. But this year, there was no Avatar. There was no Up, sadly. There was a Blind Side. It was called The Help, and people went to see it.
The Help, yeah, but it's not going to, it probably won't win the Best Picture.
No.
All right, we'll wait. We'll give our prediction at the end. There were a lot of Catholic films that came out this year.
There were.
Or Catholic-infused films. Talk about those. They were really, I mean, everything from Of Gods and Men, Emilio Estevez's The Way, The Mighty Max, There Be Dragons. I would throw The Tree of Life in there, even though Terry Malick's an Episcopalian. It's a very Catholic worldview.
Well, his background, I think, is Catholic. And the film is definitely infused with Catholic themes and elements. Most of these films, as you say, were not among the films that were honored. Tragically, I think Of Gods and Men was not nominated for Best Foreign Film, which it certainly should have been.
Tell people about that movie if they haven't seen it. It's a beautiful film.
There has not been a film that so powerfully portrays the beauty of the Christian ideal in at least the last quarter century than Of Gods and Men. It's a fact-based story about a monastery of Trappist monks, French monks, living in Algeria in the 1990s during the Algerian Civil War, and they know that their lives are in danger if they stay, but they're living in peace with their Muslim neighbors, and they feel a commitment to them. Their neighbors want, the villagers need them and want them to stay, but there's pressure from terrorists. And the debates that they have over should they stay or should they go, do they live their vocation in community with these people? It's just a wonderful, beautiful, and it portrays Christianity only at its most beautiful and winsome in terms of community, service, worship. Most films that portray Christianity also show the downside, the corruption and so forth. But this movie is only positive. It's just a fantastic
And the tension is there throughout because these men are in constant possibility of being killed at any moment. And no, it was really moving, beautiful.
And the actors should have been nominated. Lambert Wilson for Best Actor, Michael Lonsdale for Supporting Actor, and unimaginably powerful performances.
Let's talk also about the only nun nominated this year. It's a film about her. It's called God is the Bigger Elvis, which I'm still not sure of that construction, but I'll let it go. God is the Bigger Elvis, and this is a story about, a little documentary about Mother Dolores Hart.
That's right. Dolores Hart, who was an actress in the 1950s and 1960s. In 6 years, she made 10 films. She made her debut with Elvis Presley. She made 2 films with him. She played St. Clair in Michael Curtiz's Francis of Assisi, and she was on the brink of signing a contract for a major film contract where she would have been playing opposite Marlon Brando and other major stars. But also in her life, there was this idea of religious vocation. She had been to visit a local convent or abbey, and what I love about the film, which is only 37 minutes long, is it really shows how much she loved Hollywood and how much she loved the idea of religious vocation. And there were these 2 positive realities in her life. It wasn't like she chose religion in order to flee from the wickedness and corruption of Hollywood. It wasn't that at all. In fact, Dolores Hart remains to this day a member of the Academy, and she sees the screeners and she votes in the awards.
Yeah, the only nun who's a member of the Academy. Yeah, it's really something. So we'll be rooting for Mother Dolores. I know you all will too. Let's talk for a moment about something I heard today. I spoke to a 24-year-old friend of mine, and I said, "What was the last movie you saw? Great movie you saw?" He said, "I think I went to see Harry Potter." I said, "That was the last movie you saw, Harry Potter?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "I don't," and I wrote it down, "I don't go to the movies anymore. It's just not worth that much money." What do you tell people when they say those sorts of things?
Well, I think for most of the movies out there, they're absolutely right. Hollywood is producing a lot of disposable junk, a lot of schlock. And, you know, at the most, you know, something like Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol offers excitement and thrills on the big screen, and then it might be worthwhile to see it. But I think for a lot of people, a lot of the time, you know, movies they've become overpriced. Particularly when they're 3D movies and you find yourself paying a $1.50 surcharge for the glasses to watch a movie that's just not that good to begin with.
No, and the 3D is Yeah, I liked it better when it was the red and blue glasses. It seems they were closer. I don't know. I believed it more then.
But when you find a movie that's really special, like I just took my family to go see The Secret World of Arietti, which is a Studio Ghibli film. This is from the producers of Spirited Away and Ponyo. Beautiful animated film, very gentle, based on The Borrowers, the children's stories of Mary Norton. Sure. My kids loved it. Everyone in the theater really enjoyed it. It's not... it debuted at number 8 at the box office, so not one of the biggest movies of the year necessarily, but definitely worth seeing on the big screen.
Yeah, families are always looking for something to see, and you often have to, you know, compromise to find something for kids to see, and then, you know, that you don't feel totally terrible about taking them.
I just hope that you don't compromise for something like, you know, the Chipmunks sequel, or
I
the
don't go that
Smurfs or
far.
something like that.
I've had my fill of animated little creatures that should never have been animated in the first place. What do you tell people? And we're getting some emails like this. Here's a lady. I'm a lifelong film fanatic. She writes from Dallas, Diane. She said, I've been very conflicted about going to the movies in recent years because of the biases and funding most of these filmmakers. Haven't we been funding the very issues we're failing we oppose? I'm dying to see Warhorse, but I just don't, but don't think the content, even a family-friendly motive, justifies giving money which will ultimately be used for causes that I'm opposed to. What do you tell Diane?
I can understand that, and the way that I look at it is this. First of all, the amount of money that we're talking about, if you look at how your ticket dollars actually spent, you know, some of it is going to go to the teenager behind the counter who's selling you your ticket or is, you know, sweeping the floors. Some of it is going to go to pay the bills of hardworking people at the studio who are trying to do their best to make good, worthwhile, decent entertainment. To me, it's about the quality of the film. If you're supporting films that have good moral values, then those films are going to be profitable, and we're going to get more films that are like that, and that's going to exert a positive influence on the culture. I am more interested in shaping the cultural discussion and in encouraging people to see good movies in order to promote more good movies.
Come out of the bunker. Come out of the bunker.
Exactly.
It's okay. And I want to talk about the film The Artist, which I was pleasantly surprised by. I didn't know if I'd like it or not, but it was really kind of an interesting, spectacular film in its own way.
I really like silent film, and particularly not just as a film critic, but as a father of 6 with 7 on the way. Silent film is wonderful for families, and for something, The Artist is not necessarily the most family-friendly,
right.
But if it encourages parents to go back and discover Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin and Harold Lloyd, the great old silent clowns, I think that's fabulous.
All the better. Yeah. Yeah. Now, what would you recommend families do? What should be their rule of thumb as they decide what to spend their money on? And look, when you're talking about 6 children, like your household, this is an expensive undertaking.
It is. First of all, you have to do your homework. You have to know what you're going to get into. Don't walk into a movie and be surprised. Never bring your kids to a movie and be surprised. Watch movies with your children. Don't just drop them off at the theater. Don't just plop them down in front of the DVD player. Watch movies with your children, engage them, teach them to question what they see, to think critically about it, to you know, to understand and embrace the positive aspects of a movie. And sometimes there may be some aspects also that you need to teach them, well, is what this character is doing really right, or why does this happen, things like that.
Tell me, in our final moments, you said earlier you think The Artist will win, which I think as well. I mean, it's been sweeping all these other awards, the precursors to the Oscars. What should win and what should have been nominated?
Of the films that are likely to win other than The Artist, I would like to see it go to Hugo, because it embraces both the new as well as the old, the 3D, the special effects. If they wanted to give it to the film that is going to be most shaping discussions and people are going to be talking about 10, 20 years from now, I'd say give it to Tree of Life.
Yep.
I would have liked to see the Iranian film A Separation nominated for Best Picture. It will win Best Foreign Film this year, but it's better that at least not 8 of the 9 films nominated for Best Picture.
Really?
Phenomenal film about a strained marriage, and what's wonderful about it is that you like and understand all of the characters.
Yeah, I agree with you. Tree of Life should win, but it won't. It's going to be The Artist. Tell me about The Descendants. I've been getting a lot of correspondence about this movie. I haven't seen it, but they tell me it's very affirming to the family.
It's by Alexander Payne, stars George Clooney. For a while, George Clooney was looking like the front runner for Best Actor, but now the momentum seems to be behind Jean Dujardin of The Artist. Alexander Payne makes interesting humanistic films. He explores characters who have certain unlikable traits, and he finds something that's likable in them. This is a story about a man who discovers that his wife is being unfaithful to him, and then he's faced with the possibility of her dying. I thought that it goes to some interesting emotional places, but I thought it stayed kind of shallow, and I wished it had dug a little deeper.
A little deeper. Okay, well, I thank you for taking us a little deeper into these Academy Award nominees, and we'll be holding you to The Artist. Thank you, Stephen. Great to be with you. Stephen Greydanus' blog at the National Catholic Register is at ncregister.com. You can also follow him at his Decent Film Guide, which is exceptional, decentfilms.com. He always sits through these terrible films and wonderful ones, so you don't have to. So decentfilms.com, it's a great resource. Thank you again, Stephen. That's all the time we have, but the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Go to RaymondArroyo.com. The Twitter and Facebook pages are linked on the left-hand side of the site. There you'll also find the latest news, some commentary, and things you won't find anywhere else. And I will be tweeting during the Oscars, so follow me. Don't forget to send your Mother Angelica stories to Raymond at RaymondArroyo.com. Until next week, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, I'm Raymond Arroyo. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye now.